film opens within a convent, showing a young nun, Sister Mary, in devotion. Post her supplication, she covertly entered an elder sister's chamber to purloin the keys and sought to flee. Failing to unlock the gate, Sister Mary endeavored to wriggle through the gate's bars, yet she was ensnared by one of the trio of cloaked pursuers, and she let out a cry of agony as her limb was fractured by the assailant. Overwhelmed by agony, she lost consciousness, and upon regaining her senses, she realized she was entombed alive. Sister Cecilia, a fervent believer, had just settled in the picturesque Italian countryside, accepting a new position offered by a clergyman, Father Sal Tedeschi. She arrived at a distinguished convent dedicated to caring for ailing nuns in their twilight days. She was warmly received and given a tour by a fellow nun. Sister Isabel then introduced Cecilia to her quarters, displaying irritation at Cecilia's arrival. Sister Isabel suggested she depart immediately before reconsidering. However, Cecilia had firmly decided to stay. Subsequently, Cecilia formed a friendship with another nun, Sister Gwen, and began preparations for the upcoming ritual. In the midst of the festivities, Cecilia was overjoyed to reunite with Father Tedeschi. Following the event, she had a conversation with Father Tedeschi, who shared his journey of growing fond of the convent. Subsequently, Cecilia revealed her own history that guided her choice to pursue a life as a nun. At the age of 12, Cecilia enjoyed strolling on a solidified pond until the ice shattered and she plunged into the chilly depths. She nearly perished beneath the ice and was pronounced lifeless for a brief span of 7 minutes. Cecilia felt indebted to God for her rescue and was convinced she had been granted a renewed opportunity to fulfill a meaningful role. Hence, when Father Saul Tedeschi proposed that she become part of the distinguished Italian convent, she didn't hesitate to agree. Post-ceremony, Cecilia found herself in the restroom when a sob broke the silence. Puzzled by its origin, she traced the sound and discovered a nun bent over in tears and prayer. Cecilia offered solace to the nun, who turned to reveal a void where her face should be, prompting Cecilia to recoil in shock. The Reverend Mother emerged, guiding her to the sanctuary, and seized an aged, corroded spike from a transparent container. The Reverend Mother declared it to be a spike from the crucifix of Jesus Christ and exposed her own palm, bearing a wound akin to that of Jesus. She professed it as a token of pardon for her transgressions. The sight of the Reverend Mother's wounded hand overwhelmed Cecilia, causing her to faint. Upon awakening, Cecilia attempted to converse with the cardinal, who remained silent. Her calls to the cardinal were abruptly interrupted as several arms seized her from behind, and she was swiftly restrained. With cloaked figures assembling in front of her, hands clasped her face, and Cecilia emerged from her terrifying dream. Glancing towards the doorway, she noticed a silhouette fixated on her. Inching closer, Cecilia removed the lampshade for a clearer view, yet the doorway was empty. At breakfast, while the Reverend Mother addressed everyone, Cecilia shared light-hearted moments with Gwen. Their laughter caught the Reverend Mother's attention, who then chastised the 2 novices. The novice nuns quickly adapted to the unique ways of the convent. Cecilia and Gwen found joy in their diligent work, and they cared for an elderly nun as she drew her final breath. Cecilia caught Sister Isabel's gaze fixed on her, yet a fleeting veil obscured her view, and Sister Isabel vanished. That evening, as Cecilia neared sleep, an elder nun abruptly snipped her locks. Baffled yet unalarmed, Cecilia escorted the nun back to the infirmary for the ailing. Departing, she glimpsed a cruciform scar on another nun's foot. The following morning, amidst a communal bath, Gwen shared her story of entering the convent with Cecilia. Gwen once shared a home with her former partner who was abusive. In self-defense, Gwen struck back and then departed. Finding herself without a refuge, Gwen stumbled upon a convent and observed the nuns' communal life. She envied their sanctuary, a haven offering shelter, rest, and sustenance at no cost. This led her to embrace the convent life, not implying a lack of faith in God. She holds belief, yet her spiritual dedication doesn't match that of her fellow nuns. Cecilia listened to Gwen's tale in quiet contemplation until a wave of nausea overtook her after a medical examination. As she awaited the results, Cecilia's gaze fell upon a silhouette outside. She studied it intently, only to be startled by a bird plummeting before her. Shortly after, Cecilia received a summons to the cardinal's quarters for questioning. The cardinal inquired whether Cecilia had transgressed her vows prior to entering the convent. Father Tedeschi, interpreting Cecilia's bewilderment as hesitation, gently urged her to be forthright. Yet, Cecilia maintained her steadfastness, affirming she had upheld her vows since dedicating herself to God. The revelation astounded everyone, prompting Father Tedeschi to probe further about any past intimate encounters with a man. Cecilia, having never engaged in a romantic relationship and remaining chaste, denied such experiences. Upon a subsequent medical examination, the physicians were stunned to find that Cecilia was, against all odds, expecting a child. The cardinal and Father Tedeschi were overjoyed, believing Cecilia to be akin to the Virgin Mary. They organized a celebration to honor the divine wonder bestowed upon them. Yet, Sister Isabel and Gwen's expressions were far from joyful as Cecilia entered her second trimester. Amidst nausea, Peculiar occurrences began to unfold. She was alarmed to discover a tooth dislodged. Proceeding to the dining hall, all but Gwen rose to welcome her warmly, resuming their seats only after Cecilia was comfortably seated. An elder nun presented her with the morning meal, cautioning her against ambulation during her pregnancy. Gwen's irritation at the sister's conduct towards Cecilia was apparent, though it masked her genuine concern for her companion. Post-breakfast, Cecilia was unwinding in the bath when she was abruptly submerged underwater. It was Isabel who had assailed her, and Cecilia flailed as Isabel tried to submerge her. Hastily, a senior nun, accompanied by 2 novices, intervened, dragging a furious Isabel off, who ranted that she was the rightful one. The physician examined Cecilia, and Father Tedeschi breathed a sigh of relief upon learning the child was unharmed. However, Cecilia was left shaken and bewildered by the ordeal. She recounted Isabel's outburst as she was restrained. Isabel was adamant that she deserved Cecilia's fate, a sentiment that left Cecilia perplexed. Father Tedeschi soothed her, suggesting the incident was merely born of envy, assuring that Isabel would pose no further threat. Cecilia, however, was adamant about seeking a second opinion at a hospital, doubting Dr. Gallo's competence. She confided in Father Tedeschi about the alarming incident of losing a tooth while vomiting, but he dismissed it as trivial, reaffirming her well-being. The encounter with Isabel left Cecilia vigilant and wary of her fellow sisters. Strolling through the corridor, she caught the gaze of 2 nuns peering at her from a casement. Abruptly, a figure leapt from the apex of the building. And upon investigation, Cecilia's blood ran cold as she recognized the plummeting figure as Isabel. While accompanying the other nuns to Isabel's interment, Gwen leaned in to murmur to Cecilia, urging her to realize that trust within the convent walls was misplaced. Gwen's inherent skepticism had only deepened with the recent unsettling events surrounding Cecilia, reinforcing her suspicion that the convent's elders were concealing truths. Father Tedeschi, perceiving their hushed exchange, drew near to inquire about their distress. Gwen, however, unleashed her frustration on the assembly, questioning their apathy towards Isabel's demise. Her tirade against the convent and its leadership continued unabated until Father Tedeschi, along with Diacon Enzo, intervened to escort her away. Cecilia was perched on her bed when a photo frame on the wall nearly tumbled down. Behind it, she discovered a scripture inscribed in Italian, identifying it as 2 Corinthians 11:14. She sought the passage in her English Bible. The verse, "Satan disguises himself as an angel of light," took her aback, and she began to trust Gwen's warnings. Stealthily, Cecilia entered Gwen's chamber but found it empty. She then slipped into the cardinal's study and perused her personal records. A clipped article about her close brush with death caught her eye. Startled by a sudden shriek, Cecilia cautiously traced the source of the disturbance. The wails intensified, and Cecilia peered through the keyhole into the chamber from whence they emanated. Tears cascaded down her face as she beheld a nun, devoid of facial features, severing Gwen's tongue. Recoiling from the door, Cecilia was startled as an ailing nun silenced her. This was the same nun who had previously clipped her hair. The nun grinned, presenting Cecilia with a crucifix entwined with her own hair strands. Pleading for aid and a joint escape, Cecilia was met with a chilling declaration from the nun. Escape from the convent was an impossibility. Eventually, the nurses were roused by the piercing screams of Cecilia. Father Tedeschi, accompanied by others, hurried to Cecilia's quarters, finding her in a state of profuse bleeding. Desperate, Cecilia implored Father Tedeschi for aid, fearing for her life, prompting him to hasten her to the closest medical facility. Yet, the scene was a ruse. A nurse, remaining in Cecilia's chamber to offer prayers by the blood-stained bed, detected an unusual scent. Beneath the bed, she discovered a sack and discerned that the substance was, in fact, the blood of a deceased fowl. En route to the hospital, Father Tedeschi's phone rang with news that unveiled Cecilia's feigned emergency as a bid for freedom. Realizing her plot was exposed, Cecilia bolted from the vehicle. Cecilia's attempt to flee was futile. Father Tedeschi apprehended her with ease. She was escorted back to the convent, where a senior nun bathed her forcefully, reprimanding her for her escape effort. A defiant retort from Cecilia was met with a harsh slap from the nun. Subsequently, Cecilia found herself bound to a wheelchair, stationed before the altar that housed the crucifixion nail. Father Tedeschi donned his gloves and presented the nail to Cecilia, unveiling his long-conceived scheme. Prior to his priesthood, Father Tedeschi was a geneticist. He leveraged his expertise in genetics and inheritance to extract DNA from the crucifixion nail, endeavoring to engineer a new messiah. For 2 decades, Father Tedeschi faced nothing but setbacks until Cecilia's arrival marked a turning point, and he triumphed in forging a new Virgin Mary destined to carry the next Christ. Father Tedeschi escorted Cecilia to the cellar, revealing vessels housing embryos. A handful appeared typical, yet the majority bore grotesque forms. Father Tedeschi ushered her into yet another chamber, where Deacon Enzo, his aide, hoisted Cecilia's limbs so Father Tedeschi could brand her soles with a cruciform mark. Subsequently, Cecilia was confined to a chamber to thwart any further flight attempts in the final stage of her pregnancy. Cecilia, with eyes brimming with tears, conversed with the cardinal as she wrenched a nail from her digit. The physician examined her infant once more and then departed, leaving her her in the company of the Reverend Mother, as the Reverend Mother was preoccupied observing the infant on the screen. Cecilia quietly took hold of the cross and struck the Reverend Mother until she was no longer alive. Cecilia exits her chamber, suppressing the anguished cry she was on the verge of releasing because her labor had started. The cardinal was puffing on a cigarette while observing the choir's performance when Cecilia crept up behind him. She ended the cardinal's life by throttling him with her beads and was spotted by Dr. Gallo, who fled in terror. Cecilia disregarded him and proceeded directly to the cellar, dousing Father Tedeschi's laboratory with alcohol, and was about to ignite it when Father Tedeschi materialized. Cecilia experienced another pang in her abdomen and bent over in agony, which allowed Father Tedeschi the opportunity to thwart her attempt to burn down his laboratory. Cecilia seized a bottle and shattered it over Father Tedeschi's skull before making her escape. Cecilia secured Father Tedeschi within the laboratory, yet the clergyman clutched her tresses, hindering her departure. Cecilia clutched his digit to break free, but Father Eschi merely yanked her back using his alternate hand. Cecilia ignited her flame device and let it fall to the floor, setting both Father Eschi and the laboratory ablaze. Nonetheless, Father Eschi managed to rescue himself and burst through the portal. Cecilia descended the steps and discovered herself in the underground chambers beneath the convent. Cecilia dashed about in panic, searching for an exit before halting. For a moment, Cecilia sensed dread mounting within as she discerned a voice summoning her. She surveyed the enclosure she occupied. Cecilia was alarmed when she activated the illumination and beheld Gwen's disfigured corpse. She vacated the enclosure and sought an egress until she discerned daylight filtering through an aperture ample enough for her to wriggle through. Yet, Father Tedeschi apprehended her before she could flee, and he commenced incantations as he sliced into Cecilia's abdomen, aiming to extract her child. Amidst severe agony, Cecilia managed to seize the crucifixion spike and plunged it into Father Tedeschi's neck. Father Tedeschi fell lifeless, and Cecilia wriggled out through the aperture. Just outside, she collapsed to her knees, wailing as she delivered her infant. The sight of her newborn filled Cecilia with terror, and although the infant remained out of view, it was evident that Cecilia's offspring had transformed into an aberration, emitting unnatural, bubbling noises. Cecilia severed the umbilical cord using her dentition and, with a cry, she wielded a stone nearby, striking her grotesque offspring. Don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications to catch more videos like this. Thank you for watching.